Well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the A Queens Roundtable Show and Podcast. And this is part of the Born to Lead docuseries, which basically focuses on women in leadership. I have interviewed countless women across the United States, and they share the good, the bad, and the ugly about their leadership journey and basically what that means to them. And we always end on a educational note with different tangible tips and tools to help you be able to fine tune your leadership skills. I'm your host, Dr. Jacqueline Kabah Harrison, and I am super excited today and just happy to serve you with the A Queens Roundtable show, this Born to Lead docuseries. And if you are interested in being interviewed for either the Queen Spotlight or the Born to Lead docuseries, definitely reach out to me. Let's have a conversation and let's get you on the show. Also, make sure that you download the Realizing Your Potential TV app from either the Android app store, the iOS app store, or you can go on over to Roku TV, Apple TV, or Amazon Fire TV, and make sure you download the app. That way you can watch not only this episode, but all of the other episodes as well. So I have Miss Marianne in the house with me tonight. I'm going to bring her to the stage and she's going to introduce herself. But actually, you know what? Let me back up a little bit. Before I bring her in, let me go ahead and just tell you just a little bit about Marianne. She earned her PhD in 1996 in gerontology as a certified advanced nurse practitioner in oncology and palliative care. She has dedicated her 44-year career in nursing to pain and symptom management for people living with incurable illnesses. Her award-winning palliative care nursing textbook with Dr. Deb Sherman is now in its fifth edition. She has taught palliative care principles all over the world, and many of her academic publications have been translated into Japanese, Russian, and Italian. A retired university professor living in Norman, Oklahoma, Marianne is now focusing on community education regarding dying and death with the nonprofit organization Everyone Dies. So I'm going to go ahead and she's going to join me here, and I'm going to let her go ahead and finish introducing herself and just tell us a little bit more about you, Marianne. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. We were talking a little bit earlier. We're both from the Detroit area, so it's always nice to talk to another woman from the city. And I've been in Oklahoma since 2005 and retired 6 years ago.
Okay. Well, so you're retired now. Okay. All right.
Well,
So
I'm supposed to be, but what is it, 10 o'clock at night, and here we are chatting, so.
what do you normally do now? You focus on the education piece?
Well, I'm a adjunct professor at the University of Maryland Global Campus in gerontology. So I teach gerontology and palliative care 8-week courses. And I am the education director and podcast host for Everyone Dies. And so our podcasts are all based on the research. We want to give you, the listener, factual information that they can trust what we're saying and that works with what the oncologist or the nurse practitioner or the hospice nurse is telling you. I've been in all of those roles and I always have a problem when I talk, my earbuds want to pop out. They go flying. So if you see me having to stop, that's one of my things. So I've been all of those roles, and I know what I've taught people. I know what kinds of questions they've asked. And as I was getting closer to retirement, I retired at 62, and I thought, what's really needed, what's really missing is a place where people can get the information that they need whenever they need it. When I would be on call for hospice, I would get these, middle of the night calls that people were, anxious about all kinds of things. They'd have questions about all kinds of things. And I thought, well, what if there was a podcast where they could just go and listen to the information, get the answers that they need, share it with family, wherever their family lives. If they live in another part of the country or another part of the world, everybody can get the same information on the same topic. And so about a year after I retired, we started this nonprofit, Everyone Dies. And some people really don't like that title, but it's a fact. And, you cannot like it, but you can't dispute it either. And, I think that as a society, we would be much healthier mentally if we could acknowledge our mortality and say, this is a part of life, like birth is a part of life. And, we get excited and plan for births. And I'm not in any way suggesting that we need to be excited about dying, but we can plan for our death. We can do an advance directive. We can do a will. We can communicate with people about what we want, plan our funerals ahead of time if we want. We can do those things like we would for anything else. And so why not normalize death and take some control over it? Because I've seen so many people who have horrific deaths, and it doesn't need to be that way. And it comes from a lack of planning, a lack of communication, and we can really do better. And I'd like to help people begin to do better.
So, and I know you've touched on it, and I have to say this. I have to admit, I have little mixed feelings about the title as well. When I first read your bio, I was like, oh, okay. You just kind of, I had to pause for a moment there, but
yeah,
you're right. It's undisputable. We're all going that way. I used to have a coworker. When you would say, hey, how are you? How you doing today? She'd say, oh, I'm inching towards the grave. Like, okay, okay, we all are, but thanks for
reminding me.
But anyway, okay, so I know you kind of touched base on it a little bit, but why this in particular? I know you mentioned about taking charge, but why is that important to you?
Well, I don't know that it's important to me, because if it was just important to me, and it is important to me, I'd have an advance directive, which I do. I'd have a will, which I do. I talk with my daughters about my jewelry and threaten to haunt them if they put my gold jewelry in a yard sale for 10 cents. Every now and then I'll go through things and say, show me the ones that are worth something. Because this is like, oh God, I don't want them to do that. I'm sorry, I didn't know my puppy was in the room. I heard something scratching, and it's Millie. So, I'm planned. I've talked about what music I want at my funeral. I've talked about that I don't want to be embalmed and put in a coffin. The people in my life know what I want. So it's like, for me, I've covered the bases. But as a nurse, and as a palliative care nurse, and as a hospice nurse, I have seen people die in ways that are not consistent with what they've lived. And I've been one of those people as a palliative care consultant and as in working in supportive care who would say to people, like talking about, do you want to be resuscitated?
Right.
And the natural response to that is to say, well, of course I do.
Right.
It's equivalent to, well, do you want to die? Well, no, I don't want to die. So of course you're going to resuscitate me. But then I go the next step and say, well, what do you think that means? What do you think it's like? And the only point of reference that most people have is what they see on TV. And on TV, it's nice and neat and everybody survives.
Right. Yeah.
But that's not how it is. And so what I talk about with people is, I'll say, well, do you want to know how it really is? If they say no, then, that's okay. But if they say yes, and most people say, well, yeah, what is it really like?
Mm-hmm.
So I walk it through. Here's what we do. Here's how we do it. And in the course of that, because you're not breathing and your heart's not working, we're going to put a tube down your throat and put you on a ventilator, a machine that's going to breathe for you. Now, the problem with an intervention like that, especially after you've coded to need that, means something's really gone wrong, right? Is that getting that person off that ventilator is extremely difficult.
Okay.
And then it means that where you're going to die is going to be in an ICU on a machine that your family then is going to have to make a decision, because usually after you've been resuscitated, you're not awake. You're not able to say, I don't want this or I do want that. Mm-hmm. So then your family is going to have to make a decision. Do we take this off? And that's really hard for families because they're saying, I'm killing my parent. I'm killing my husband. I'm killing my wife. As opposed to, we've used this piece of technology. It's not doing what we want it to do. It's keeping them alive, but we have to keep them sedated in order for them not to fight that machine, in order, for it to be effective. And so a decision has to be made. And with any piece of intervention, any piece of technology, not starting it is much easier than making a decision to remove it. Okay. And so if you say to yourself, well, so is this what you want? And 10 times out of 10, well, I'll say 9 times out of 10 to be like, there's a very, very rare person that says, okay, I'll do anything not to die. Even though, do you want to then say, well, but you're going to die. Something's going to happen and you're going to die. Mm-hmm. So if we accept that piece of reality, then the rest of it makes sense to then say, how do you want to do it? Right. And then you can make a decision and you can say, I don't want this. I don't want the tube down my throat. I don't want my wife to have to say, take that out. Just don't resuscitate me. If my heart stops, let it stop. Leave it alone. And just because we have a piece of technology doesn't mean that it should be used for everybody no matter what. There are situations where it makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. There are other situations where all it does is prolong the pain and the agony. Right. So we need people who will answer the tough questions in a way that people can understand it. Mm-hmm. And so that when you're making a decision about, do you want to be resuscitated, you have a clear vision in your head. What does that mean? And then you can say, yes, I want it, or no, I don't. It's like going to an Italian restaurant and ordering tripe and having no idea what it is until it's delivered to you, and it's which is awful kind of dried fish. It's a dried God, I'm sure there are people listening who say, oh, it's wonderful. But if you don't know what it is, don't order it.
That's the point.
That's the point.
Right. Well, I have to say that, my dad, he when he was, coming close to that time, he was very, very fragile. And the doctors, talked to us about it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because he had been having some respiratory concerns. And they explained to us, because like you said, most, and we had never, well, my dad did tell us that, he would want us to do whatever we needed to do to preserve his life. But we did have to have that difficult conversation with the hospital staff about exactly how violently, and and what they put the body through, like in terms of, because he was very, very, very frail, like in terms of breaking his ribs, and like, was he going to be like, basically just like what you said, like what type of and he was on the ventilator, like what type of a quality is he going to have, because he was already having respiratory concerns, and they were like, if you have to really kind of weigh it all out.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like you said, we typically think of what we see on TV.
Right.
And basically, the way they explained it, it's it's very, I don't know the word for it, but a very traumatic type of experience, for someone to go through, and
It's
especially some
very, very
was
aggressive,
right, very aggressive. Yep, very
Mm-hmm.
aggressive. So, um, yeah, you're right. We need people like you to come in and and just talk to us, and allow us to ask questions, and, because unfortunately, like you said, a lot of people don't talk about it. You know,
Well,
um,
we've been socialized not to talk about it.
mhm,
There's sort of like you don't talk about politics, and you don't talk about sex, and you don't talk about death. And there might be good reasons not to talk about the other two, because I guess you can avoid politics and you can avoid sex, but you can't avoid death.
right,
Like to say, and I've had many people say, or on social media say, I don't want to hear about this. Okay, that's your choice, but at some point you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have questions, if not about yourself, then about a parent or a loved one or a child or a neighbor, like, so we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. So serious illness, there's a lot of illnesses out there.
right,
None of us know which of those we might become, get diagnosed with. And so, given that that's true, where do you go to get real clear information about what is this disease about? Why does it happen? What can you expect? How do you die from this?
hmm,
Um, and if you want that information, then it's there. And if you don't want it, you can sort of roll the dice and take your chances. I would prefer, as a nurse, to have people come in with knowing what they want, having an advance directive, having had the conversation with people who are going to make the decisions,
right,
and sort of have a clear plan. It's like, people who give birth, they like to have a birthing plan.
right,
Yeah, is it going to go exactly as you planned? Maybe, maybe not, but there's a plan.
right,
And you plan a wedding, all the things in life, and like we love to plan things.
right,
And then you get to this wrapping up stage of life,
right,
and we say, well, whatever happens,
right, right,
because we're afraid, because we don't know what comes after death.
hmm,
Um, all good reasons, but still, if it's an inevitable thing, then I think that we should educate ourselves about it. And on the internet is, there's all kinds of information that Some of it's credible, some of it's not. But ours is, like I said, we look at the research, we look at the current protocols, we let you know, here's what we know about it. That might change with the next research project or the next thing that we discover. But here's what we know about it right now. Right. And here's what you can expect right now. Right now, we're in the sort of in the middle of doing a series about cancer. All the way from why does cancer happen in the first place? Why did it choose me? All the way through staging of cancer, surgery, chemo, radiation, immunotherapy, all the different pieces of it that you might hear about, or you might say, oh, my neighbor's getting chemotherapy, but I'm not sure exactly what's involved with that, except maybe you throw up. Everybody knows about seeing that in movies. But if you want to know, and you want to know, well, here's what they're going through, and here's how maybe I can help them.
Right. Okay.
Then you can educate yourself.
Right. Yeah. And when you know better or know more, you can make a better informed decision.
Exactly.
So let's segue into, thank you for sharing that and talking with us a little bit about that. And I know you're going to mention it at the end as well, but just because I want to go to a quick commercial break, but tell the audience now in terms of the podcast, is that something that's, how do they tune into that?
So any place you listen to a podcast, you can find us there, where it's called Everyone Dies. We also have our own webpage and that's www.every1dies.org. And you go there, and the first thing that pops up is this week's podcast. And you just click on it and you can listen to it. So it's very simple. But there's also a little hourglass up in the top that if you have a particular topic you want to know about, just type it in. This is we just completed our 5th year. We're starting our 6th season, and we've done a podcast a week for the last 5 years. Okay. So there's 260 podcasts on such a wide range of topics. And so whatever you want to know, well, I won't say whatever you want to know, but of those 260 topics, you can look and see what there's a lot of information about grief, a lot of information about how we die, planning a funeral, all the way down to choosing the clothes if you're going to have a viewing that you want to wear, or have somebody put together for you and take to the funeral home. So that information, some people listen because they say, this is interesting. It's a very small number, unfortunately. I would love for people to do that. But most people listen because they're going through it in their life, and they want some more information.
Okay. And that is at www.every, and then the number 1 dies, DIES.org.
That's right.
So we're going to just take a brief commercial break here. The Born to Lead docuseries actually stemmed from the book where I was the visionary author, and it's titled Born to Lead, Awakening the Leader Within, where we talk specifically about African-American women and leadership. So if you want to grab that, it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, I think Walmart, and a couple of other places. I don't even know off the top of my head, but definitely on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. So if you want to grab that. So when we come back after this brief commercial break, we are going to dive into talking more specifically about leadership. So just hold Just don't go anywhere. We'll be right. Okay. Okay, so I'll see you shortly again. There we go.
Realizing Your Potential LLC presents Born to Lead, Awakening the Leader Within. This anthology brings together women that have overcome hardships in their lives and have managed not only to survive but thrive. Their stories focus on resiliency, adaptability, and strength, acknowledging the innate strength and leadership qualities in African American women.
All right, all right, all right, all right. So let me ask you first. I have a couple of questions for you, but
Okay.
where would you like to start? As being my guest on the show, what's the first thing that comes to your mind that you want to share with the audience in reference to leadership? We'll start there.
I throughout my career, I've found that I would fall into leadership positions, and or when I was younger, I would always see something that could be better, and I would talk to my manager, my supervisor, and say, "Could we do it this way?" And some people are very open to that kind of idea, and and they give you that chance to say, well, okay, try that. And given that opportunity to say, how can we take where we are and improve the situation? Um, I honestly don't know where that came from. I don't. I sometimes think it was Walt Disney and watching that show on Sunday nights growing up, and that whole, you can change the world. There's magic in the world, and that we can do that. Um, but certainly, it wasn't like from my family of origin. That's not how how we functioned. My my dad had an eighth grade education. My mom had a high school education. I was one of the first people in the whole family to go to college, and the only one that kept going to get a PhD. And I've often wondered, like, where did that come from? But every role I went into, this kind of thing would occur, where I would say, we could do this way. And maybe I've been fortunate that I said it in such a way that people said, well, let's try that. Not to say that there weren't also people who resisted and who said no and who said that's not the way we've done things. And how do you know that's going to work? And I'd say, I don't. But if we don't try, we're not going to know if it worked or not. And so I've always found myself in this change agents kind of position. And I think that we can say, well, that's not my job. That's not why I'm here. That's not what I should do. Or we can say, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Right.
And I've always kind of fallen into, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Right.
All they can say is no,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not going to devastate me. It might not stop me from asking again later, but if I get a no, I might, like go back and rethink it and tried a different way. But throughout my career, I've had these opportunities, or created the opportunities sometimes, to say, well, let's try this. You know, one example, like not long before we retired, our cancer center.
Almost never happens, and it happens today. Okay, sorry about that, everyone.
See, the angels are coming down to say that's a good one to tell. So our cancer center opened this beautiful cancer center, and our two main programs were gynecological cancers and breast cancers, both of which the treatments really take a toll on a woman's sexual health.
Okay.
And I kept saying, you know, we're treating people with cancer with chemotherapy and radiation and all of these things that really have a negative outcome on sexual expression. And I could go into great detail, but I won't. And I kept saying we need to offer women a place where they can talk about that and learn what to do so that they can. Cancer takes away so much. Does it need to also take this away from them?
Right.
And got some research applied and got some research funding and a variety of things. But we ended up starting a supportive care program where we would help do pain and symptom management for anybody in the cancer center. So imagine this huge cancer center, and we have, one patient would have ovarian cancer, and then your next patient would have breast cancer, and the next patient would have prostate cancer, and the next person would have, so you're dealing with all these different kinds of diseases in terms of pain and symptom management, so people didn't have to suffer. And then we also started a sexual health clinic where people could come and, get help with the issues regarding, vaginal health and their hormones and that kind of thing. And we made tremendous change in terms of quality of life for people. And somewhere in the middle, I don't know at what point I would, because it's stressful to be a change agent. It's stressful to put yourself out there and say, let's do something different. Let's look at this in a different way. And I would think, when is this ever going to settle down? Am I ever just going to have a job where I just go and just do my job? And somewhere maybe in my 40s, I realized that's never going to happen. That's not me. Maybe that's not, if you have that leadership kind of personality, that just doesn't happen. And so you might as well embrace it and say, what kind of trouble am I getting in today?
I like that. What kind of trouble am I getting in today? Okay. And and I hear that a lot, just in terms of, that whole piece about just not accepting things the way they are. Like actually looking at it and saying, you know what, we don't have to do it like this. Maybe we can try this. And if it works, then that's great. But if it doesn't, then okay, what's the harm? We can go back to doing it the way that we were doing it.
Right.
It's taking those small, let's say, I don't know, maybe risk may be too strong of a word, but just to prove a point, just stepping out there. And when people would ask you, well, how do you know that's going to work? I don't, but as a leader and as entrepreneurs, whether we're coaches, consultants, authors, educators, right? We don't know,
Yeah, I would have students, in clinical, and I would start a new clinic or program, and I remember in pre-conference, the student said to me, so how many times have you done this already? And I said, oh, I've never done this before. And they went, oh my God, you've never done this before? It's like, oh, no, we'll figure it out.
Right. We'll
You know,
figure
we have, here's what we need to teach other women. You know, we have a body of knowledge, and we can take that body of knowledge and then we can apply it in other situations. Like,
right.
I don't have to have firsthand experience with everything. I can say, well, I've started this program before and I kind of know how it went. This is a program for older adults. Well, I'm a gerontologist. I know about that. And so now I'm going to take these things that I know about and we're going to make something different. And nobody's going to die, hopefully. Nobody's going to die. And at least, you know, not because of anything we're doing. And it could be phenomenal. And so, you know, I've always had this sort of this philosophy of no guts, no glory. Not that I've ever had really much glory, but I had a lot of guts. And maybe it's because we're from Detroit, we have guts. But, you know, I look at things and I say, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? And is this going to end me? How much resilience do I have? How much chutzpah, whatever the word it is that you want to have, how much do you have? And are you willing to take a risk?
I have a question for you. My question for you is, can you share a defining moment in your leadership journey? And it's okay if it kind of overlaps with something that, you know, that you've already shared.
A defining moment. I don't know. I think my professional journey has been maybe a series of little moments, you know, that give you the confidence to seek the next moment. I don't know that, you know, that I could say, well, this happened and it told me this. My life has not been that dramatic. It's been more of, well, let me try this and see what happens. And something just popped into my head when I was really little. Two things that my family would talk about. One is I pushed a button up my nose. And my mother was really unhappy about this. And she said, why did you do that? And I said, I wanted to see what was going to happen. And she said, well, what did you think was going to happen? And I said, well, I didn't know. If I knew it, I mean, I was too little to say. If I knew it was going to happen, I wouldn't have had to do it. But I didn't know. And so I did it. And I got in trouble, but it wasn't the end of the world. And my sister was a beautician and she had like straight edged razors. And she left one laying around. And I thought, oh, I wonder. And I took it. I mean, I didn't cut a vein. I cut my finger and I was bleeding. And again, my mother's like hollering at my sister for leaving her straight edge razor around and me for, what are you doing? I said, well, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I think that maybe that's just my personality, is that I go to each thing like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but let's find out.
That's your personality. But, you know, and that's always so interesting to me when you talk to women and you start, you know, as they start accounting different stories and, oh, yeah, well, you know what, when I was such and such, just like what you shared, you know, it's that being inquisitive, you know, being inquisitive, not knowing, oh, let me try it, you know, and as a leader, we often take risk, you know, and the thing of it is, it may not be what you want it to be. It may not be what you anticipated, right? But you'll never know unless you actually try it. And like you said, no, you didn't lose your life. It wasn't, that wasn't your last day on earth. You know what I mean? You got in trouble, but the thing of
I
it
did
was,
get in trouble.
right. And that's what it sounds like. And finally, like you said about your 40s, you just kind of said, you know what? I accept this. And I hear that very often,
Do you?
because I know growing up, I was always told, like to be seen and not heard, so I hear that a lot from women.
Mm-hmm.
And if they weren't told it exactly, they saw that behavior modeled from their mom, their aunts, grandmothers, things of that nature. And a lot of women have said, I tried to curtail it, or I kind of kept sweeping it under the rug. I didn't want to acknowledge it. But at some point, it's just like, you know what? I just accept it. So sometimes I'll ask, when did you, officially put on that leadership cap, if you will? Because there's still a lot of women that are operating in leadership roles, but they're not necessarily, recognizing it as such. So it's just interesting to me to kind of see that pivotal point. Like when you mentioned that, I just accepted it. Like, well, what kind of trouble am I going to get into today? And then as you talk a little bit more, we find out about the button.
Yes, right. Or I can remember my mom took me to Hudson's, and underneath, like, it was, I can remember the escalators, and there was this bottom part, I guess, like the kickboard area, and there were all these switches, and I thought, and she's looking at something, and I'm like down on the floor looking at this, like, wonder what happens with those. Well, I clicked them, and all the lights went out in Hudson's. Like, oh, that's where the light switches are. I turned them back on. My mother was, oh my God.
I know your mother had a time with you, didn't she?
Oh yeah.
Are any of your children like that? Do have that type of trait?
They both do. They both do.
All right.
And my oldest is a has a doctorate in audiology.
Okay.
And she was telling me about, she said, some of the older people will come in, get their ears checked or their hearing aids checked. And she said, and sometimes they'll have an accident. They'll urinate on themselves, and then they're mortified. They have to sit and wipe clothes. Right. And she says, so I started a sort of changing area, and she got donated socks and underwear and pants and skirts and plastic bags. And so if somebody's incontinent, she can say, here's the stuff you need, go and change. Here's a plastic bag, put your wet stuff in there. No big deal. We have this here because this happens.
Yeah.
And I thought, you're my kid.
Yeah.
She sees a problem. Let's fix it.
So with a solution. Yep. Because like with that, it's helping people reclaim some of their dignity.
Yeah.
No one wants to sit there and urine and
Plus you're mortified. Oh my God, I must be the only person who comes to the audiologist and has an accident. Well, no, you're not, because we wouldn't have this closet if you were the only person.
Yeah.
So I was real impressed with that.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, this time has just flown by. So, I guess, is there any last, this is so fitting, right? Any last words that you with, go ahead and share that. And I guess maybe share with everyone just the website again. And I guess maybe your social media handles if you want.
Sure. Well, I always tell people that, at the end of life, there's sort of 5 things you want to say to somebody who's dying. And you want to say, I love you. I'll miss you. I forgive you. Will you forgive me? And goodbye. And so those are just a little nugget of things to remember when you're with somebody who's at the end of life and you're saying, I have no idea what to say, or what am I supposed to say, and if after they die you say, I should have said this, you don't get a do-over in those situations. So I would suggest those things as last words, and come, listen. We're very friendly, and in our show, and it's called Everyone Dies, and it's www.everyone with the number one dies.org, and you can look. We're on all the social media places as Everyone Dies, and we also have a children's book, which is kind of pretty odd to have a children's book named Everyone Dies. But one of the things that parents have difficulty with is talking to kids about why people die, or why did my dog die, or why did my fish die, or why did grandpa die. And so we give you the words to talk with your kids. It's a picture book, good for ages, 0 to 12 or so. And it'll give you a common language to talk with your child about death. And you can find that at Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or we have a website for that. It's everyonediesthebook.com. But there's not many books called Everyone Dies, so you'll find it.
No, you don't. I mean, it is. But I love that idea, because you're right. So many of us, I'm just thinking, I've never been put in that situation, but that's very challenging to explain that to a child, so.
And in a way, here, I have it back here, and in a way that they'll understand. Is it going to focus? I don't know.
I don't know if they will be able to see it, but I can't see. Oh, wait. Okay, yeah. I see it now.
There.
Okay.
And but sometimes we'll say to kids, oh, well, they've gone to heaven, or they've gone to sleep, and they went on a long trip, and all of those things I think we say because we don't know what else to say, but the end result is that it scares the child.
Right.
It makes them say, well, I'm not going to go to sleep because I don't want to never come back.
Right.
And why would grandpa go on a trip and not take me? And
right.
all very logical questions, right? But so we can do better. And so our book helps with that. And it's a great gift, like if you've got your grandchild whose first dog or first fish or whatever has died. It's a great book to start having that normalizing conversation. We did that with our grandson. I mean, the book is about a conversation with our grandson when he was 4 years old. And it's the same language that we used when his dog died. When we talk about things that are dead, and he's like, oh, he has this, okay. He understands it. Kids understand it. And it normalizes it. And it hopefully, what I would love is for there to be the next generation of people who just know that it's a part of life, and that we, we don't know what happens afterwards, but
right.
Like how bad could it be?
Yeah. I mean, this, what, and this is a whole nother, well, I won't even get into this. I won't say that's a whole nother subject in terms of like culturally, how we respond, in Western society to death. But that would be, look, that could be a part 2. Or at least that could be part 2. But this is
or you can come and listen to the podcast, because we talk about different cultures, different approaches and rituals, and we're
okay.
We kind of want to stimulate all parts of people's brains to make it interesting and not scary.
Right. Okay. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Wow.
I mean,
Well,
we even do a recipe of the week every week of foods that you could take to a funeral lunch because God knows you can't go empty-handed.
right, right.
So,
Well, this is definitely, you're one of a kind. I've never interviewed anyone where we've discussed this subject matter. So
mhm.
this has been very, very informative, and I've enjoyed having you on the show
Thank you. It's
very
been
much.
great to be here. And if you want to do a part 2 or 3, we can talk about it.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, I really enjoyed having you on the show, and I'm sure everyone, will get a lot out of it. Um, so we are concluding today for this episode for the Born to Lead docuseries. Again, if you're interested in being interviewed and want to share, maybe leadership is something that you enjoy talking about, you definitely maybe want to give some tips and tools to others to help them kind of hone in and fine tune their leadership skills, then I would definitely love to have you on the show. So just, reach out to me. I social media handles. I'm actually on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and it's under my name, Dr. Jacqueline Kabah Harrison, and the same on Facebook. So either one of those, if you want to look me up that way. My email address is realizingyourpotential, the numbers 123 at gmail.com. And definitely make sure you visit the platform so you can download the Realizing Your Potential TV app so you can make sure that you stay up to date and catch up on all of the episodes, all of the interviews, and so forth. Definitely a wide range, but everything under personal, professional, and leadership development. Realizing Your Potential TV network is the place you need to be. So thank you again, and stay tuned until next time, everyone. All right. Well, take care. Talk to
You
everyone soon.
too. Thank you.